One teen died. His parents were paid to stay silent. You've never heard the story, and that's exactly how they want it. That's how most theme park tragedies end. Not with sirens or lawsuits, but with silence, a lawyer's handshake, and a confidential settlement. A ride reopens, and a life is quietly erased. Every year, thousands of people are injured at parks designed to bring people excitement and happiness. Some people break bones, others lose limbs, and a few never come home. Yet still, the parks keep running. The music keeps playing. The mascots keep dancing. The illusion is strong. Parks look safe. The colors are bright. The employees smile. Everything smells like popcorn and sunscreen. But that surface is fragile. Beneath it, a darker truth lurks. This isn't just a story about roller coasters gone wrong. This is about an industry built on cold calculations, where safety improvements are weighed against profit margins, and the value of a human life is measured not in morality, but in the cost of a potential lawsuit. Imagine an iceberg. Above the surface, spinning teacups, cotton candy, fireworks, bright distractions built to dazzle. But below lies a vast hidden structure layered with negligence, cost-cutting, deception, cover-ups, and suffering. Most will never see it, but it's real, and it's massive. This video is a descent. Each level takes you deeper beneath the surface. At first, the stories will feel familiar. The stalled rides, the public apologies, the unfortunate malfunctions. But soon, we'll cross into territory few have ever seen. We'll expose the cracks in restraint systems, the oversight failures that let unsafe rides reopen, the child deaths written off as rare unfortunate tragedies, and the cover-ups designed to protect profits, not people. Some parks treat injuries like spilled drinks at a restaurant. Clean it up, offer a voucher, move on. But spilled drinks don't sever legs. They don't drown children. They don't launch guests into the air because of a failed bolt. By the end of this video, you may never see theme parks the same way ever again. The descent begins now. Level 1. Temporary closures and warning signs. In 2021, a piece of metal the size of a man's hand tore loose from a 420-foot roller coaster and struck a woman in the head as she waited in line. The ride had passed inspection just days earlier, and the part that failed, it wasn't even on the checklist. These corner cuts at operational parks aren't always obvious to visitors. What happens when a 420-foot tall steel giant, once the pride of Cedar Point, suddenly falls silent after a metal piece detaches at high speed and strikes a guest in the head? The answer reveals how theme parks masterfully use temporary closures to mask catastrophic failures while controlling the narrative around tragic incidents. On a warm day in August 2021, Cedar Point visitors waiting in line for the Top Thrill Dragster experienced something no theme park guest should ever witness. Rachel Hawes, standing in the queue area, was suddenly struck in the head by a flying metal object that had broken free from the coaster during operation. This was a life-changing injury that would alter her future forever. Cedar Point's immediate response? Temporary closure. That's what they called it. A carefully chosen phrase designed to suggest business as usual would return any day. But this wasn't just a routine pause. It was damage control, disguised as maintenance. Like slapping a band-aid on a severed artery, the label masked the deeper rot beneath. While Cedar Point downplayed the horror, the Ohio Department of Agriculture launched a formal investigation, recognizing what the park wouldn't say out loud. This was a catastrophic failure that demanded answers. For nearly a year, the colossal structure of Top Thrill Dragster stood motionless against the Lake Erie skyline. Its 420-foot tower no longer a thrill, but a silent reminder of the violence that unfolded below. Cedar Point maintained its temporary narrative the entire time, offering no real updates on the investigation and staying quiet about Rachel Hawes' condition. Behind closed doors, park officials weren't focused on accountability. They were negotiating settlements and mapping out the future of their signature ride. That future came into focus in September 2022. Cedar Point announced that Top Thrill Dragster would never operate again in its original form. After a year of calling the closure temporary, the park finally confirmed what safety experts had long suspected. The ride's design had fundamental flaws that couldn't be patched or ignored. But even this announcement was carefully worded, focused on what's next, not on what went wrong. Cedar Point's approach reveals a standard industry playbook. Label catastrophic failures temporary until public attention fades, then quietly make permanent changes while minimizing any connection to the original incident. The silence isn't an accident. It's engineered to separate crisis from reinvention in the public memory. "I'm lucky to be alive," Rachel Hawes stated in a rare public comment about her experience. Words that stand in stark contrast to the park's enthusiastic marketing of the redesigned attraction. In a telling twist, Top Thrill 2 operated for just 1 week before closing again, this time due to issues with the trains. This rapid failure suggests the underlying problems were never truly resolved. The park now claims the ride will reopen in 2025, continuing the cycle of closures and vague explanations. But what about the rides that never closed, despite claiming victim after victim? At our next level, we'll descend into the mechanical nightmares that keep operating day after day, killing guests while theme parks point the finger at pre-existing conditions. Level 2. Mechanical glitches and overlooked malfunctions. 6 people have died on Disney's Space Mountain since 1980. Not a single day of operation was missed. Each death was blamed on the victim's pre-existing conditions. But what if the ride itself is the condition? What happens when theme parks turn their attention away from visible failures and temporary closures? The answer lies in the hidden gears of neglect, mechanical glitches that operate day after day despite troubling safety records. Not all rides that deserve scrutiny get shut down. Some of the most concerning attractions continue welcoming thousands of guests daily. Their questionable histories concealed behind carefully crafted narratives of guest responsibility rather than mechanical failure. Consider Disney's iconic Space Mountain, a stable attraction operating since 1975 at Walt Disney World. Behind its squeaky clean reputation and persistent popularity lies a disturbing pattern that Disney executives would rather you not examine too closely. This indoor roller coaster has been linked to multiple deaths over its decades-long operation. Yet the narrative surrounding these incidents follows a suspiciously similar pattern, one that conveniently shifts responsibility away from the ride itself. In July 2015, a 55-year-old woman from Tennessee named Pamela Lynn Haynes lost consciousness while riding Space Mountain. She later died, with the Orange Osceola Medical Examiner's Office determining the cause as cardiopulmonary arrest and septic shock. Disney's response was immediate and calculated, pointing directly to Haynes' pre-existing conditions: hypertension, congestive heart failure, and chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. The message was clear. It wasn't the ride that killed her, it was her. This pattern of deflection stretches back decades. In August 1980, a 10-year-old girl died after becoming severely ill on the attraction, her death attributed to a pre-existing heart condition. In August 2006, 6-year-old Rame Masarwa, who had terminal cancer, fainted after experiencing the ride and died later that day. The medical examiner cited a metastatic pulmonary blastoma tumor. Just months later, in December, a 73-year-old man lost consciousness on Space Mountain and died 3 days later from a heart condition. 1 death is a tragedy. 2 is concerning. 6 on the same ride? That's a pattern. In each case, Disney successfully redirected attention from the ride itself to the victim's pre-existing health conditions. This carefully constructed narrative absolves the attraction and its maintenance procedures from scrutiny. But it also obscures a more troubling question. Why does this particular ride have such a consistent record of triggering fatal health episodes? The mechanical demands of Space Mountain, its high speed, sudden turns, and disorienting darkness create physical stresses that might feel moderate to a healthy rider, but could prove catastrophic for someone with underlying health issues. Yet instead of examining whether the ride's design might require modification, Disney's main response has been to update health warnings, effectively shifting the responsibility onto the guests. What remains hidden from public view are the maintenance logs and inspection reports that could reveal patterns of mechanical failure. While Disney insists that Space Mountain undergoes regular inspections and updates to ensure safety, the specifics are sealed behind corporate secrecy. Unlike public facilities, where safety records can be obtained through Freedom of Information requests, theme parks operate with remarkable opacity regarding their internal maintenance practices. The enclosed environment of Space Mountain creates another layer of potential danger. Unlike outdoor coasters where operators and riders can visually inspect the track and structure, Space Mountain's darkness conceals potential mechanical problems. This darkness, part of the ride's appeal, also serves as a convenient curtain hiding wear and tear. When coupled with the ride's age, which is nearly half a century of operation, these conditions create the perfect environment for overlooked mechanical issues to develop. Death in the dark, and yet the ride never closes. But these malfunctions grow even more terrifying when they don't just harm riders, they trap them. In our next level, we'll uncover what happens when evacuations go disastrously wrong, and why some guests are left dangling upside down for hours, while undertrained staff scramble to save them. Level 3. Stranded riders and failed evacuations. At Universal Studios, 4 guests were left suspended upside down for over an hour on the Harry Potter ride. Their lawsuit revealed park staff had no evacuation training. When you're hanging 50 feet above concrete, seconds feel like hours, and hours feel like death. That moment when a ride jerks to a halt and doesn't restart isn't just an inconvenience. It's the start of a nightmare that theme parks desperately try to keep quiet. When you're suspended hundreds of feet above the ground with no way down, those warning signs about a ride may stop temporarily stop being minor print. They become your terrifying new reality. The emergency procedures parks claim to have are often just theory, concepts staff have barely practiced. Consider what happened at Universal Studios Hollywood when the Harry Potter and the Forbidden Journey ride malfunctioned mid-operation. What should have been a magical journey through Hogwarts turned into an hour-long ordeal of fear and physical distress. 4 riders were left suspended at a precarious angle that the park downplayed as a routine stoppage. According to court documents filed in their subsequent lawsuit, the ride vehicles suddenly and without warning came to an abrupt stop, stranding their cart midair at an angle that left them tilted backward and to the right. This wasn't just uncomfortable, it was physically damaging. The complaint detailed how the riders were left in a position which subjected them to severe injuries for an unreasonable and dangerous amount of time. While the public relations team spun this as a minor incident, the reality for these trapped guests was an escalating physical and psychological crisis as minutes turned to hours. "Pray for us," one victim texted her family, believing she might not survive. What makes these situations so dangerous isn't just the physical position of being stranded, but the inadequate evacuation procedures that follow. Parks cut corners on emergency training, hoping that the statistical rarity of serious malfunctions will protect them from ever having to execute complex evacuations. Unfortunately, when these inevitable failures occur, undertrained staff find themselves improvising dangerous rescue operations they've rarely, if ever, practiced. The spatial design of modern theme park attractions compounds these evacuation challenges. Rides like the Harry Potter attraction feature complex, enclosed environments with limited access points. When a malfunction occurs mid-ride, getting to stranded passengers often requires specialized equipment and training that seasonal employees simply don't have. This creates a dangerous gap between what parks claim they can handle and what they're actually prepared for. Even when parks do have evacuation protocols, they're frequently designed with the minimum safety standards in mind rather than guest comfort or psychological well-being. Consider that riders may be suspended in uncomfortable or even painful positions for extended periods while staff attempt to restore ride functionality before initiating an evacuation. Parks generally try all possible system resets before committing to an evacuation, extending guest distress. The psychological impact of these incidents is rarely discussed but can be substantial. Guests who experience prolonged stranding report symptoms resembling acute stress reactions, panic attacks, elevated heart rates, and in some cases, post-traumatic stress that continues long after the incident. These psychological effects rarely make it into official reports or park statements, which prefer to focus on the absence of major physical injuries. One suspended rider attempted suicide months after being trapped. The park claimed no connection. This pattern of negligence isn't isolated to Universal Studios. Throughout the industry, parks have demonstrated a troubling pattern of being unprepared for the very emergencies their own safety protocols claim to address. Evacuations that should take minutes stretch into hours as staff struggle with unfamiliar procedures, often making up solutions as they go along. Being stranded is terrifying, but it pales compared to what happens when safety systems are deliberately sabotaged. In our next level, we'll show you how theme park operators knowingly tamper with life-saving mechanisms and the deadly consequences when restraints fail at 100 miles per hour. Level 4. Structural failures and catastrophic accidents. A 14-year-old boy was decapitated on a water slide in Kansas. Park owners rushed construction to appear on a reality TV show. The child of a state lawmaker, they paid $20 million to silence the family. Beyond anxiety-inducing ride malfunctions lies something far more sinister: deliberate tampering with life-saving safety mechanisms. In March 2022, what should have been an exciting spring break adventure for 14-year-old Tyre Sampson became a nightmare that exposed the darkest aspects of theme park operations. Visiting Icon Park in Orlando, Florida, Sampson boarded the Orlando Freefall, a 430-foot drop tower operated by the Slingshot Group. As the ride reached its peak and began its descent, something went fatally wrong. The restraint system meant to secure him failed, and Tyre was ejected from the ride, plummeting to his death in full view of horrified onlookers. This tragedy was entirely preventable. The investigation uncovered a shocking truth. Ride operators had intentionally modified the safety systems to increase capacity and profits. Tyre Sampson weighed more than the ride's 287-pound weight limit. Instead of following protocol and denying him access, operators made a fatal decision. They manually adjusted the seat sensors to accommodate larger riders, allowing the harness to open wider than designed, without triggering the emergency alerts that would have stopped the ride. They made a business decision, and Tyre paid with his life. This wasn't an oversight. It was a calculated modification that knowingly compromised the integrity of the entire system. The restraints were built with strict tolerances. Surpass those limits, and the ride should shut down. By tampering with those sensors, operators created a death trap. To the naked eye, the harness looked locked. In reality, it was useless during the violent forces of the drop. Worse still, the ride lacked the redundant safety features standard on similar attractions. Most drop towers include backup seatbelts. Orlando Freefall did not. It relied entirely on the compromised over-the-shoulder restraint, and when that failed, Tyre had nothing left. The autopsy from Orange County Medical Examiner painted a grim picture. Tyre died from blunt force trauma, suffering from multiple fractures and abrasions to his head, neck, and body upon impact. Though clinically described as an accident in medical terms, this classification obscures the deliberate nature of the safety violations that led to it. There was nothing accidental about the decision to override safety alerts or to allow a rider exceeding weight limitations onto a thrill ride without any adequate restraints. Witnesses still wake up screaming, haunted by the sound of Tyre's body hitting the ground. This tragedy reveals a disturbing culture within certain sectors of the theme park industry where profit motives override safety concerns. The operator's willingness to bypass safety systems demonstrates how theme parks sometimes view safety protocols as flexible guidelines rather than rigid requirements. Each additional rider represents more revenue, creating perverse incentives to maximize capacity at the expense of proper safety procedures. The legal consequences were appropriately severe. In a landmark verdict that sent shockwaves through the amusement industry, a jury awarded Tyre Sampson's parents, Nikia Dodd and Yarnell Sampson, $310 million in damages in December 2024. This substantial judgment was levied against Funtime Handles, the Austrian manufacturer of the ride, holding them accountable for their negligence. These structural failures are devastating, but they're still visible. In our next level, we'll uncover how theme parks hide deadly secrets in plain bureaucracy. Maintenance logs filled with falsified signatures where no one checked the bolts that would later kill a family of 4. Level 5. Maintenance negligence and falsified records. At Disneyland, a 22-year-old man was crushed to death on Big Thunder Mountain when an axle broke free. The investigation found mechanics had signed off on safety checks they never performed. The ride reopened 10 months later with minimal changes. Paperwork seems harmless enough. Signatures, dates, checklists. But what if those mundane maintenance logs were hiding deadly secrets? While Tyre Sampson's death revealed the horror of physical safety tampering, beneath the bureaucracy of theme parks lurks an equally lethal danger: falsified maintenance records where workers sign off on critical safety checks they never performed. This isn't theoretical. It's exactly what happened at the happiest place on earth, where a paper trail of lies led directly to a young man's death. On September 5, 2003, 22-year-old Marcelo Torres boarded Big Thunder Mountain Railroad at Disneyland for what would become his final ride. As the train entered the tunnel, something went catastrophically wrong. The locomotive's left side axle, which should have been securely fastened, came completely loose, jamming against a brake section. The force launched the locomotive upward, where it struck the tunnel ceiling before crashing down onto the first passenger car. Torres, seated in that car, suffered devastating blunt force trauma and extensive internal bleeding. Despite being rapidly transported to the hospital, his injuries proved fatal. In the aftermath, investigators discovered the immediate cause was painfully simple. Mechanics had failed to properly secure the fasteners on the locomotive's floating axle during routine maintenance. This wasn't a complex engineering failure or an unforeseeable accident. It was straightforward human error, a critical step skipped in a maintenance procedure. Signatures on a dotted line, blood on a roller coaster car. The investigation revealed something more disturbing beneath this single error. The maintenance records for Big Thunder Mountain told a chilling story. Workers had explicitly signed off on safety checks they never actually performed. The paperwork showed a perfect maintenance history with every box checked, every procedure completed, every inspection passed. Reality told a different story. The locomotive had been released back into service with critical safety components literally hanging by a thread, waiting to fail at the worst possible moment. Disney's maintenance protocols required multiple verification signatures at various stages, a system designed to catch errors through redundancy. But investigators found this carefully designed safety system had devolved into a rubber stamping operation. Workers routinely signed off on each other's work without actual verification, creating the illusion of thorough safety checks while the reality was dangerously different. The failsafe had become a facade. The most alarming aspect was that investigators uncovered evidence of a broader pattern extending to other attractions throughout the park. Maintenance records supposedly verifying critical safety procedures contained similar discrepancies, suggesting a systemic problem rather than an isolated incident. Perfect paperwork created a fiction of safety while masking potentially deadly conditions throughout the park. One mechanic later testified he'd been instructed to just sign it and move on. How did such a dangerous culture develop at Disney, a company obsessed with maintaining its pristine public image? The investigation pointed to a significant shift in operational philosophy that had taken root years earlier. In 1997, then Disneyland president Paul Pressler and consultants McKinsey & Company implemented a new cost-conscious maintenance approach. This shift toward reliability-centered maintenance was designed to optimize efficiency and reduce costs, but it had unintended consequences. Under this new system, maintenance crews faced increasing pressure to minimize ride downtime. Extended maintenance periods meant lost revenue, and the business metrics used to evaluate performance increasingly emphasized quick turnarounds. Workers found themselves caught between properly completing time-consuming safety procedures and meeting aggressive operational targets. The falsified records became a shortcut to resolve the contradiction between thoroughness and speed that management had created. But lies on paper become blood on steel. And when we descend to our next level, we'll reveal something even more horrifying. The ride operators who control your family's safety often receive their training just minutes before their shift began. Level 6. Undertrained operators and fatal mistakes. At Dreamworld Australia, a ride operator received just 15 minutes of training before her shift. Hours later, a pump failure on the Thunder River Rapids ride killed 4 guests when rafts collided. The emergency stop button was inches from her hand. She'd been told, "Don't worry about that button. No one uses it." Beyond falsified paperwork lurks an even more troubling reality in the theme park disaster Iceberg. Human error born not from negligence, but from corporate neglect. What would you think if you knew the person controlling your multi-ton thrill ride received their training mere minutes before your arrival? At Dreamworld Australia, this nightmare scenario became reality with devastating consequences. On October 25, 2016, what began as an ordinary day at Dreamworld on Australia's Gold Coast transformed into one of the deadliest theme park disasters in the country's history. The Thunder River Rapids ride, a seemingly tame water attraction compared to the park's more extreme offerings, became a sight where 4 visitors, Kate Goodchild, Luke Dorset, Cindy Lowe, and Ruzbe Aragi, would lose their lives in a horrific sequence of mechanical failure and human error. The ride's design was simple. Circular rafts carrying 6 passengers floated along a water channel propelled by artificial rapids. What guests couldn't see was that the entire system depended on 2 water pumps maintaining consistent water levels throughout the circuit. When one of these pumps failed catastrophically that afternoon, water levels dropped rapidly, creating conditions for disaster that the ride's operators had never been prepared to handle. The young ride operator facing this emergency, identified in court documents only as Miss Williams, had received approximately 15 to 20 minutes of training on the Thunder River Rapids ride that very morning. This wasn't hyperbole or exaggeration. The coroner's investigation confirmed this shockingly brief training period. Imagine being responsible for the lives of dozens of guests after less training time than it takes to watch a sitcom episode. Lives in the hands of someone who learned their job during their morning coffee. As the water pump failed and levels dropped, an empty raft became stranded on support rails near the end of the conveyor belt. The operator watched helplessly as another raft carrying the 4 victims collided with the stranded vessel. With proper training, she might have prevented the tragedy entirely. Within arm's reach was an emergency stop button that could have halted the ride before the fatal collision. But Miss Williams had no idea it existed. The coroner's investigation revealed something even more disturbing about this critical safety feature. The operator hadn't simply overlooked the button's existence during her rushed training. She had specifically been told not to worry about that button. No one uses it. This casual dismissal of a crucial safety mechanism exposed the systemic failure within Dreamworld's operational protocols. The emergency stop wasn't presented as a vital last resort, but as an unnecessary complication in the ride's operation. One child survived by clinging to her dead mother's body as it floated in the water. The investigation uncovered that the operator had zero understanding of the ride's potential failure modes. She couldn't identify critical situations requiring immediate shutdown, lacked knowledge of emergency protocols, and had received no practical training on managing crisis scenarios. Her abbreviated training focused almost exclusively on loading and unloading passengers, the aspects that kept the ride moving and generating revenue. This wasn't an isolated incident of a single poorly trained employee. Dreamworld's parent company, Ardent Leisure Limited, had systematically reduced operator training throughout the park. An investigation revealed a deliberate corporate strategy to minimize non-productive hours, training time when rides weren't generating revenue. By rushing operators through abbreviated training modules, the company could maximize the hours rides were operational and processing paying guests. When systems collapse and victims cry out for justice, theme parks activate their most disciplined team, not safety engineers, lawyers. In our next level, we'll expose the calculated machinery that silences victims before they can speak, and why the worst accidents are the ones you never hear about. Level 7. Corporate cover-ups and silenced victims. At Universal Studios, when 15 people were injured in a tram crash, lawyers arrived before ambulances. Victims were offered settlement papers while still bleeding. The average non-disclosure agreement is signed within 72 hours of an accident, before injuries are fully diagnosed. While safety systems collapse due to untrained operators, theme parks deploy a different kind of expert entirely. Crisis management teams with very specific instructions. When 15 people were injured in a tram crash at Universal Studios Hollywood, their first response wasn't medical evacuation or comprehensive safety assessment. Their immediate priority was dispatching lawyers to the scene before victims could even speak to independent attorneys. This wasn't an isolated incident or coincidence. It's standard operating procedure in an industry where controlling the narrative takes priority over addressing root causes. The April 2024 tram crash at Universal Studios Hollywood offers a perfect case study of how these damage control mechanisms operate. As the Los Angeles County Fire Department arrived on scene after 9 p.m., finding one person with critical injuries and others with minor injuries, Universal's legal team was already mobilizing. The California Highway Patrol confirmed substance abuse wasn't a factor in the crash, but the exact cause remained mysteriously, quote-unquote, under investigation, a phrase that parks deploy strategically to limit information flow. While victims were still being treated, Universal's crisis team was already crafting press statements and dispatching legal representatives to establish first contact with the injured. Their goal wasn't primarily to offer support, but to secure early agreements before independent legal counsel could intervene. Lawyers have settlement papers ready while medics are still treating victims. What's particularly disturbing is how this rapid legal response has been refined into a science. Crisis management teams maintain pre-drafted settlement agreements with adjustable compensation figures. The documents are specifically designed to include comprehensive non-disclosure clauses that prevent victims from discussing their experiences publicly, effectively erasing these incidents from the collective knowledge about park safety. The legal teams target victims at their most vulnerable moment, when they're disoriented, in pain, and concerned about mounting medical expenses. Universal's official response to the tram crash focused on supportive messaging. A spokesperson confirmed they were supporting the guests and reviewing the circumstances. Carefully crafted language that acknowledges the incident without admitting fault. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, their priority was limiting exposure and protecting the brand's reputation. The studio tour resumed with a modified route and reinforced safety protocols within days, a move designed to quickly normalize operations and shift public attention away from the incident. They offered me $50,000 to never speak of it again, one victim later revealed in court. This pattern of prioritizing corporate image over transparency becomes even clearer when examining cases that actually reach courtrooms, a rare occurrence by design. Consider Pamela Morrison, who suffered a serious spine injury while exiting the Harry Potter and the Forbidden Journey ride. Unlike many victims who accept initial settlement offers bundled with silence agreements, Morrison refused. She declined multiple settlement offers specifically because they included non-disclosure agreements that would have prevented her from sharing what happened. Her decision to reject these NDAs ultimately resulted in a jury award of $7.25 million, a figure that reveals just how much theme parks are willing to pay to keep accidents quiet. The jury broke down the award into $250,000 for future medical expenses, $2 million for past pain and suffering, and $5 million for future pain and suffering. These amounts suggest an understanding that the impact of park negligence extends far beyond immediate injuries. These corporate cover-ups are orchestrated to protect individual parks, but our final descent reveals the darkest truth of all. The entire global theme park industry operates on a foundation of calculated human sacrifice. Level 8. Systemic industry-wide negligence. Class Action Park in New Jersey wasn't an anomaly. It was just honest about what all theme parks do. Each year, executives calculate how many deaths are cheaper than safety improvements. They have a term for it: acceptable loss ratio. Your child's life has a specific dollar value in their spreadsheets. Beyond the settlements and silencing agreements lies the darkest revelation of all. Remember Class Action Park?
Yeah, I think the very reason people were attracted to Action Park was because they could get hurt. That was the allure of it. I'm 100% sure of it.
That notorious death trap in New Jersey with 6 fatalities and 110 injuries in a single year? What if I told you it wasn't an anomaly, but merely the most honest version of how the entire industry operates? Action Park stands as a grim monument to theme park negligence, a place where the worst aspects of the industry were merely more visible than elsewhere. The Alpine slide alone caused 26 head injuries in just 1 year. Among its victims was 19-year-old George Larson Jr., who died after riding this concrete and fiberglass track where riders used sleds with rudimentary brakes. What made Action Park so disturbing wasn't just the injury count. It was how the park embodied the industry's approach to safety, just without the polished veneer that other parks maintain. Interviewees in the Class Action Park documentary described it as a place where unruly 1980s teenagers were given free rein to go gonzo on strange contraptions that seemed to violate the laws of common sense and perhaps physics. This chaotic atmosphere wasn't unique to Action Park. It was just more transparent about an approach to safety that continues throughout the industry today. One former executive confirmed they had an internal formula: X deaths per million visitors equals acceptable loss. While Action Park became infamous for its dangers, similar patterns of negligence emerged globally when we look closely enough. In 2007, the Fujin Raijin 2 roller coaster at Expoland Amusement Park in Japan experienced a catastrophic derailment. Yoshino Kogawara, a 19-year-old university student, died when the train slammed into a railing, crushing her skull. 19 other guests suffered injuries. The cause? A broken axle that hadn't been replaced for 15 years. Think about that timeline. For 15 years, guests rode a roller coaster with an aging, weakening axle, a critical safety component, while park management ignored basic maintenance protocols. Following the tragedy, similar roller coasters at other Japanese parks were voluntarily shut down and inspected, highlighting how the problem extended beyond a single park. The question isn't why this one park failed, but how many others are operating with similarly neglected components right now. Six Flags represents another disturbing example of how systemic problems persist despite catastrophic consequences. In May 2002, a groundskeeper named Samuel Milton Guyton, 58, entered a restricted area beneath the Batman roller coaster at Six Flags over Georgia. The impact of a passenger's dangling leg struck him in the head, resulting in fatal head trauma and decapitation. You might think this horrific incident would prompt redesigns of similar attractions. Yet 6 years later, in June 2008, 17-year-old Asia LaShawn Ferguson IV was also decapitated at the same park after entering a restricted area under a ride track, reportedly trying to retrieve a lost hat. Same ride, same death, 6 years apart. No meaningful changes. What connects these horror stories across different parks and countries isn't just bad luck or isolated negligence. It's the absence of standardized safety regulations. The theme park industry operates under a patchwork of wildly inconsistent oversight. Safety measures and enforcement vary dramatically between countries, states, and even counties. This regulatory void allows parks to implement different approaches to safety based primarily on local requirements rather than universal standards of care. What Action Park, Expoland, and Six Flags reveal is an industry structured around calculated risk rather than safety as an absolute priority. The global theme park industry has learned that a certain number of injuries and even deaths can be absorbed as a cost of doing business. They've mastered the art of isolating incidents as unfortunate accidents rather than acknowledging them as symptoms of systemic failures. The theme park industry operates on a foundation of acceptable risk rather than true safety. It's a system where park operators make daily decisions about how much danger is economically acceptable, how many maintenance checks can be skipped before an incident becomes likely, how minimal can training be while still meeting legal requirements, how much can be saved by postponing equipment upgrades. Behind the bright colors and cheerful music lies a cold calculation: the cost of your safety versus their profit. They've calculated exactly how much your child's life is worth, and they've decided some deaths are just good business. What makes this particularly insidious is that the most vulnerable victims are often children and teenagers who lack the life experience to recognize the dangers or question the safety measures in place. Parents trust that rides are safe for their children, unaware that the actual risk assessments happening behind the scenes are often based on financial rather than safety considerations. The next time you hear the music swell and the gates open, remember, you're walking into a negotiation, not for fun, not for entertainment, but for your life. And in that negotiation, you're the only one who doesn't know the terms. Want to see more dark industry secrets exposed? Check out our channel for videos on cruise ship dangers, fast food nightmares, and airline cover-ups. Hit subscribe to make sure you never miss the truth.